Royal fans are convinced Meghan Markle is lying about her age. In fact, they think she's older.
Your age so wrong. Did you know that in 1997, when she met Yasmin Bleeth, when she claims that she was working for Humphrey Yogurt, age 13?
The number was printed, not whispered, not speculated, not guessed printed. And once it was printed, it refused to stay buried. Because if that number is wrong, then everything built around it starts to shift. And if everything shifts, then the story people thought they understood stops being a story and starts becoming a pattern. March 1997. A 17 magazine feature that should have disappeared into archive dust instead becomes the starting point of something nobody has been able to shut down. Next to Meghan Markle's name, age 21. But every official record says August 4th, 1981, that makes her 15 at the time, not 21. Not a rounding error, not a typo you casually miss. A 6-year gap sitting in print, cleared through editors, fact-checkers, publication layers at a national magazine. And the archive is still there. Untouched, accessible, no correction, no explanation. Just a number that doesn't belong, and a silence that somehow speaks louder than any correction ever could. Because once that number exists, the question is unavoidable. Was it a mistake that slipped through every safeguard? Or was it a version of a biography that didn't match the one later presented to the world? And that's where this stops being about a number and becomes about control.
Let's actually get to the truth of this issue, and it's a surprise. Here we go. So, if you go over on Google, is she lying about her age? It currently says August 4th, 1981, that she is 41. Well, she would be 42 today.
Because controlling your past isn't nostalgia. It's leverage. And leverage is power. Now, hold that tension. Because the next layer doesn't come from strangers, it comes from inside the family. Samantha Markle publicly confirms 1981 as the correct birth year. Clear, direct, on record. That should have closed the door. Except it didn't. Because when people started digging into the defamation lawsuit Meghan filed against Samantha, they pointed at details inside sworn court documents that don't sit cleanly with that public confirmation. And that's where it fractures. Because when public statements and legal filings don't align perfectly, that gap doesn't disappear, it expands. And then Thomas Markle Sr. steps in, not with speculation, but with something more damaging: contradiction. He describes a version of Meghan's early life that doesn't match the narrative sold globally. Not struggling, not hustling, not building from nothing but comfortable, supported, present on the set of Married, with children. A completely different foundation. And if the foundation shifts, the entire structure built on top of it starts to feel staged. Then Thomas Markle Jr. adds his own voice. Separate, uncoordinated, same direction. 3 family members, no shared strategy, no synchronized messaging, yet all pointing at inconsistencies in the same story. And that's where it stops looking like bitterness and starts looking like pressure. Because independent contradictions don't stack neatly unless they're pointing at something real. And here's where it escalates, because family claims can always be dismissed. But personal stories? Those are harder to escape, especially when they're told repeatedly, publicly, and recorded. Start with the frozen yogurt shop. The story is simple, relatable, almost too perfect, working at 13, learning responsibility early. Except when someone contacts the shop directly. The response is blunt: they never employed anyone that young. Not without strict legal approvals that weren't part of their operations. So now there are only 2 options. Either the business is wrong about its own policies, or the story doesn't match reality. And neither option is comfortable. Then comes the deodorant commercial, dated to 1996 or 1997. Against the 1981 timeline, she would have been 15 or 16. That fits until you listen closely to how she describes it. The tone, the independence, the professional framing it doesn't sound like a teenager. It sounds older. Subtly, but consistently. And subtle inconsistencies are the hardest to dismiss because they don't scream, they linger. Then the Katie Couric clip, the moment that keeps getting replayed. The childhood letter that changed a commercial. A powerful story until the age attached to that moment starts shifting depending on the interview. And that's where it becomes dangerous. Because when a story depends on a specific age, that age is the anchor. If the anchor moves, the entire story drifts. And Northwestern University sits quietly in the background, never directly challenged, but never completely aligned when the rest of the timeline is mapped out. It doesn't collapse the story, but it doesn't stabilize it either. It just hangs there, waiting. Now step back and look at the pattern. These aren't random errors. Random errors scatter. These don't. Every inconsistency points in the same direction. Older. The yogurt shop, the commercial, the interview, the education timeline, they all require her to be older than officially stated. And that's not noise. Noise doesn't have direction. This does. And just when that pattern starts gaining traction, something else happens. Something recent. Something that shouldn't be connected, but somehow is. Prince William sits down with Heart Radio. Calm, controlled, effortless. He talks about Catherine's recovery, shares memories of Queen Elizabeth, even settles the cream tea debate jam first, cream second. The internet responds instantly. Warmth, stability, authority, the future king looking exactly like the role demands. And then, almost immediately, Meghan posts an Instagram video. Scones, jam, perfectly styled, high production. But the reaction isn't about the recipe. It's about the timing. And more than that, it's about what's inside the video. For the first time, she uses the children's names directly. Lilibet, Archie, not implied, not protected, spoken openly in branded content. After years of strict privacy positioning, that shift doesn't go unnoticed. It detonates conversation. Because this isn't accidental. The speed, the precision it shows awareness. Real-time awareness. This is someone tracking the media cycle and choosing exactly when to step into it. And that creates a new question. If she tracks the narrative this closely, then she knows about the age debate too. And yet on that topic, nothing. No comment, no denial, no clarification. Total silence. And silence in a career defined by public response is never neutral. It's a choice. And while that silence holds, something darker starts circulating again. A photograph. Not a rumor, an actual image that keeps resurfacing at very specific moments. It allegedly shows a visibly pregnant young Meghan. Not an adult. Young, and if the age discrepancies hold any weight, the implications of that image become explosive. But here's the part that keeps people watching. The image doesn't appear randomly. It doesn't drift into quiet weeks. It resurfaces precisely when the age debate peaks. Every time, within days, sometimes hours. And every time, the response is immediate. Fake, edited, AI-generated, the same script, repeated across platforms. But when someone runs the image through professional detection software, the result comes back. 94% authentic. Not confirmed. Not definitive. But not dismissed either. And that's where it stops being about the image and becomes about the pattern. Because patterns don't lie easily. Because now we're not looking at one inconsistency. We're looking at a system. A magazine archive that was never corrected. Family contradictions that never aligned. Personal stories that require different timelines. A photograph that refuses to disappear. And a response strategy that is selective, precise, and on this one issue, completely absent. And just as that pattern begins to form clearly, the story hits something else. Not speculation. Not memory. Paper, documents, the place where stories are supposed to end. But in this case, they don't. They stop. And when documents stop instead of answering, that's when the story doesn't close. That's when it deepens. And the next layer is where everything changes. And this is where the story stops pretending to be about inconsistencies and starts looking like something that was managed. Because when people went looking for answers in documents, they didn't find clarity. They found resistance. The first claim that refuses to disappear is the Chicago marriage record. It sits in online discussions like a shadow, never fully confirmed, never fully dismissed. But the details attached to it are precise enough to keep pulling people back in. Mid-1990s. Chicago. A filing that allegedly exists but cannot be accessed. Not missing sealed. And that single word changes everything. Because sealed documents don't just vanish. They are deliberately placed out of reach. Now run that against the official timeline. August 4th, 1981, that would make her around 14 at the time of that alleged filing. Not 16, not close enough to debate. 14. And if a document existed placing her in a legal marriage context at that age, it wouldn't just complicate her story, it would detonate it. But every attempt to verify it hits the same wall. No record returned. No confirmation, just silence behind a locked door. And that silence becomes louder when you flip the timeline. Because if the alternative year 1976 is considered, suddenly the same alleged document paints a different picture. Late teens, still undisclosed, still hidden from public narrative, still never acknowledged before a royal wedding that was examined by the entire world. Different age, same problem. Because whether she was 14 or 19, the existence of a prior marriage, if true, was never part of the story presented publicly. And that's not a small omission. That's a missing chapter. Then comes the birth certificate, the one document that should have ended this entire conversation years ago. Not speculation, not interviews. Paper, verified, final, and yet, despite years of scrutiny, despite global attention, despite endless discussion, no publicly accessible, independently confirmed birth certificate has surfaced in a way that closes the debate. Not because birth certificates are entertainment, but because in a story built around a 5-year discrepancy, that one document is the anchor. And the anchor isn't there. And that absence doesn't sit alone. Because Doria Ragland enters the frame again. A 1996 eviction lawsuit tied to her name exists on public record. On its own, it means nothing beyond difficult circumstances. But alongside it, there are references to another file one that people claim cannot be accessed through normal channels. Not missing, not misplaced, inaccessible, and when you place that next to the sealed marriage claim. Next to the missing clarity around the birth certificate, the pattern starts tightening. Because 1 inaccessible document is normal, 2 is coincidence, but several clustered in the same narrow window of time stop feeling accidental. They start feeling contained. And that's the part the mainstream conversation never fully confronts, because it's easier to dismiss one inconsistency than to explain a cluster. A cluster requires intention. A cluster suggests control. Now stack everything together, not as isolated points, but as a single structure. A 1997 17 magazine printing an age that doesn't match any official record and never correcting it. 3 family members contradicting her narrative independently, across different years, without coordination. Personal stories, frozen yogurt shop, deodorant commercial, Katie Couric interview, Northwestern timeline, each requiring a different age to make sense, but all moving in the same direction. A photograph that resurfaces on a precise cycle tied to when the age debate peaks. A Chicago marriage claim that cannot be accessed. A birth certificate that never fully closes the question. Multiple documents from the same period that are either sealed or inaccessible. That's not noise, that's weight. And then comes the most uncomfortable detail of all, the one that doesn't require speculation, doesn't rely on documents, doesn't depend on interpretation. Silence. Because this is someone who has never been silent when challenged. She has responded to tabloids, confronted institutions, addressed criticism directly, publicly, repeatedly. When something matters, she speaks. That's the pattern. That's the documented behavior. Except here. So the story doesn't collapse. It tightens. Because at its core, this was never about whether she is 42 or 47. That number stopped being the point the moment it created a pattern. What this has always been about is the gap. The gap between a public identity presented as authentic and a trail of details that don't align cleanly with that identity. And that gap keeps widening. Because every time the conversation resurfaces, it doesn't lose pieces, it gains them. More connections, more timing patterns, more unanswered questions. And the one person who could close that gap completely doesn't. Not with a statement, not with a document, not with a single direct answer. So the question doesn't end, it evolves. Because when multiple independent threads, documents, interviews, family statements, archived records all begin pointing in the same direction, at what point does coincidence stop being enough? At what point does silence become the loudest answer in the room? And more importantly, if this is the part of the story that remains unanswered after everything that's already been exposed, what else is sitting just outside the frame? waiting for the moment it connects.